Stay in the moment. Everybody's in a race to get to where they see their perfect life being. I think the best message I can give is stay in the moment. Do the job you're doing, whatever that is. Stay in the relationship you're in. Invest in it. Uh, Everything else will fall in place if you do that.
Pass the torch, man. Keeps getting better.
Awesome. Well, Pete, thanks for joining the podcast. Much appreciated. We're here in Dallas at your practice arena, but thanks for joining.
Absolutely. Excited to be here and excited to be in the middle of a hockey season.
Yeah, and so you grew up in Ontario, right?
Yep.
And so when did you first fall in love with the game of hockey?
Yeah, it's funny. My mom and dad neither had a hockey background. My dad moved over from Holland when he was 17 to Canada to work on a farm. Had a soccer background, a lot of European immigration at that time, but like all Canadian kids and kids in Wisconsin, kids in Minnesota, when you grow up in those states or provinces, you quickly realize that everybody plays hockey. It's the number one sport. So I think they started me in it just because it was a thing to do, and I fell in love with the game. And funny enough, my dad did too. He never played the game, never watched the game growing up, and but he's an absolute expert on it now.
That's awesome. I like to say, I've talked to a lot of hockey players, I like to say they can skate before they walk up in that Midwest area.
For sure.
No, that's awesome. And so your playing career, you played a little bit in the OHL,
Yeah.
IHL for some years as well. But when did you know that it was kind of time to hang up the skates and move on from your playing career?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if you ever know. I think as a kid growing up, you always have that dream, and you want everybody wants to play in the NHL. You always think you're just a good season or a break away from getting there. I remember I was playing junior in the OHL. We went to a Memorial Cup. I got drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Back then, it was a 12-round draft. I got taken in the 12th round, so that shows you where I kind of ranked on the scale. But to me, that was my ticket, and I was going to get a chance to play. And signed an NHL contract, played in the minors for a few years. I remember my junior coach, late great Tommy Webster, who's passed on. He coached the LA Kings and New York Rangers. He coached me in junior, and he told me, when I turned pro, he said, in 3 or 4 years, you'll know whether you're going to be an NHL player or not. And he goes, you're smart enough to know. And he goes, if you're not, he goes, all I would tell you is, think about a different path than being a minor league player for 10 or 15 years. And, I took that to heart, and that's what I did. I played 3 years of pro and realized I was not going to make the NHL. Probably could have kept playing in the minors for a while, but went back to law school.
There you go. So you went to law school before you actually got into coaching?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I started. A funny story. Paul Maurice was my junior teammate and our captain in Windsor. He lost an eye playing junior hockey,
Wow.
and that ended his career. He was a Philadelphia draft pick, and he was actually the reason visors were instituted into Canadian
Really?
junior hockey because of a puck to the eye that he got. So that was the first year they went to visors.
Wow.
A little aside, but Paul's career ended because of that. He got immediately into coaching at a really young age, and when I retired, I moved back to Windsor where he was living. He was coaching in Detroit. He offered me a place in his house. I was just going to go to law school and live with him, and kind of get on to the next chapter in my life. And a job opened up on his staff while I was in law school and living with him. He asked me to fill in until he could find somebody. Started filling in, and never looked back.
Wow, there you go. Did you actually finish school and get that degree?
I did finish school. I had a job lined up at a law firm after my graduation date, and again, for people listening, it's where kind of fate intersects with everyone's life. Paul was the coach GM of the junior team that I had been an assistant with for the last 3 years while I was in law school. Our owner at the time was Pete Carmanis from CompuWare. He bought the Hartford Whalers as well as the junior team. and he moved Paul to Hartford that summer that I graduated from law school. So all of a sudden, Paul's job opened up as coach GM. I think about timing in life. If all those things don't happen, I'm probably working in a law firm somewhere right now and miserable. So, and missing out on all the journeys and the stories and the things I've got to go through. So that's I got pretty fortunate.
Yeah, and you've had an unbelievable career coaching wise, but you started out, like you said, in junior, then in the OHL, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
And then so your first NHL job was from OHL coach. I believe you won Coach of the Year and whatnot. And then you jumped right to head coach of the Florida Panthers. Do you think that you were ready to make that leap from kind of the OHL right to the NHL, being in that head seat?
I thought I was ready. I wasn't even close to ready. I think that's the beauty of coaching, is I think you have to have a little bit of blinders on as far as when you make those leaps. You have to go in full of confidence. There's no other way to approach it. If you go in and the players sniff insecurity, or they feel you're not ready, or you're not sure, they sniff that out pretty quickly. So, the best thing I did was I wasn't looking for my next job in junior hockey. I coached in junior hockey total for almost 15 years. I rode buses, loved every minute of it, worked on development, taught at that level. It's different than pro hockey. There's a lot more practices, a lot more teaching, a lot more babysitting. But I loved it. And, I wasn't, looking to be on the fast track to the NHL. I wasn't looking every summer for the next job. I just stayed in the moment, did the best job I could in junior, enjoyed every second of it. And the NHL eventually knocked on the door. And I think, when you do it that way, I think you're more ready because you haven't rushed yourself.
I think when you get thrown into the fire, you can also learn a lot more as you go. And so you mentioned that you weren't ready those first 3 years in Florida, but I guess what was your biggest lesson? Because then you move on, you go to New Jersey, and I believe your first year with the Devils, you go to the Stanley Cup Finals, right?
Yeah.
And so what was your biggest takeaway that you carried over from your time in Florida that you applied to that Jersey team?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. Like, I had played some pro hockey in the minors, but it had been probably 15, 20 years since I'd been around a pro team. I remember walking into Florida. Brian McCabe was our captain. You don't get those jobs unless the team has gone off the rails. So it hadn't been a very good team, a little bit dysfunctional. So, I came in guns blazing, was gonna, grind them into the ground with the toughest John Tortorella training camp I could come up with. And I remember 2 days in, I had about 6 veterans pull groins, hip flexors, and all of a sudden I looked up and I didn't even have 2 teams for training camp left. So it was a good lesson for me in dealing with pros, the proper way, and that it wasn't junior hockey. I mean, at that time, junior hockey was a dictatorship. You brought kids in, they were 16 to 20 years old. Part of it was you were responsible for them 24 hours a day. So you had to run it with a little bit of a military slant in order to make sure that, you were responsible for them to their parents. And in pro hockey, it's not like that. And it took me at least that training camp and a few more months to figure that out. And then you find that sweet spot where, you realize they're men and they're pros, and you've got to treat them that way.
Yeah, there's a real difference. You use the word like babysitting during junior hockey as a coach. Like that transition, you can't use that same strategy with the players that are 38 years old, like a Joe Pavelski now or whoever it may be. It's not the same as a young kid who's 16 years old.
No, you can, but you might only last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They'll run you out of town. So I learned that pretty quickly. And I think that's the other piece for people that want to coach is you have to adapt. You can't be so closed-minded in your ways that you're going to go to whatever level you're moving to and say it's my way or the highway, because it's not the same. And I think the guys that last are the guys that go in, make mistakes, but then adapt. Talk to the players. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? I remember I got fired in Florida, and I took that feedback and fixed some things when I went to New Jersey and got hired by Lou Lamoriello. And then, I like to think I did the same when I went to San Jose, Vegas, and here.
That first kind of, what you mentioned, getting fired from Florida, were you down in the dumps, or were you, all right, I got to keep going and keep this going and look for my next job?
No, I was down in the dumps. I had a year left on my contract, so I was going to get paid for another year. But honestly, we didn't have a good team in Florida. We battled hard my first couple of years there. By the third year, it was a little bit of a train wreck, and both on and off the ice, financially, everything. And I got fired at the end of the season, and they started a rebuild. I got one phone call that summer. I remember, sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring, and I got one phone call, but it was the right phone call. It was Lou Lamoriello who called me to interview for the Jersey job. I went in, and I had never met Lou before. We had a mutual friend in Brent Sutter who had coached for him, who I had worked on a World Junior team with, and I think Brent put a word in for me. But, there's no more intimidating man in hockey than sitting across from Lou Lamoriello for 4 or 5 hours in a hotel room in a job interview.
Yep.
But thankfully, Lou took a chance on me, and it was the best hockey experience for me that I've ever had, and at the right time. I was a young coach that jumped into the NHL probably a little ill-prepared, but also in an environment where there wasn't a ton of leadership above me. And I needed that, and Lou was all about that. Lou was all leadership, all direction, all structure, and that allowed me to coach. And at that point in my coaching career, that's exactly what I needed.
Yeah, and then from there, you've had a ton of success. So I guess looking at your successes, what did some of those teams that made runs to maybe the Cup Finals, some of those playoff teams possess, I guess, as a whole, that some of those other teams that didn't make those runs not have?
Well, the key, anywhere I've won or gone on long runs, your best players are your most honest players. I think back in junior hockey, I won a national championship, Memorial Cup. Our captain was Mike Richards, who was a longtime NHL player, multiple Stanley Cup winner. Honest, block shots, fight, do whatever it took to help win. When your best players are like that, you win. In New Jersey, it was Zach Parise, longtime captain in the NHL, one of the best American players of all time. In San Jose, it was Joe Pavelski and Joe Thornton, same thing. And here I think we've got the same thing with Ben and Pav and some of those guys. So I think that's the key. Your team has to be built where your best players are your most honest guys and your most bought-in players, and that's key.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you obviously coach Pavs in San Jose, and now here with Dallas, and you guys have had a ton of success early in the season. So I guess how lucky do you feel to have that leadership group of Jamie and Joe?
Well, I don't think it's an accident that success follows certain people around in their life, and Pav's one of those guys. It's not an accident he won in the USHL. He won in college. He's won in the NHL. Everyone says, some guys get in the right spots, but I'm not a believer in that. I think some guys like Joe Pavelski make the spot. They're in the right spot because of their leadership and how they approach things and how they are inclusive. He's a special player, but he's a even more special leader in my mind.
One of the best examples of Joe as a leader this season is the unique situation of Wyatt Johnson staying at his house. And so we had the opportunity to talk to Wyatt. It's a pretty cool situation. Joe's acting as like a father figure almost, mentoring him. So it's a cool situation. Have you been a part of that process and kind of monitoring it?
You know what, I have, and I love it, and I can't tell you how fortunate Wyatt Johnson is to be in that position. I've seen over my NHL career, this is my 15th year now in the league, so many young guys come in and either live on their own or live with a buddy on the team, another young guy. I think this is something that every young guy should have to go through is learning to be a pro, and not just at the rink. I think. The thing about Joe is Joe lives it. He eats right. He shows up at the right time. He always does it right. And if you don't see that every day and you don't learn it, it's hard to incorporate that into your life. And I think Wyatt Johnson is going to look back, at the end of his long, successful career, because this kid's a special player too, and go, boy, was I fortunate to have had that opportunity to learn from a guy like Joe. And you hope a guy like Wyatt pays it back one day. I think when you talk to Pav, the reason he did it for Wyatt is because he saw it done, by other guys in San Jose, Joe Thornton or Patrick Marleau, in the past. So, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Wyatt's a super talented player, but I think he's a testament to kind of how the game of hockey has evolved over the years. So you started coaching in the 2000s, and now here in 2022, coming up on 2023, I guess, what do you think the biggest change in the game has been in terms of the play?
Well, I just think the way teams are built now, it always used to be. I remember working for World Junior teams, where they'd have ghost rosters and you'd be putting together, grind lines, on your third and fourth line, making sure you had 6 grinders at the world level. Yeah. Even Olympic teams built that way. Now it's 4 lines of guys that have to have enough skill to play. There's still room for grind, but everybody has to have skill, even the grinders. And the game is played at such a high pace, at such a high skill level. I heard John Tortorella talk about all the leads being blown in the NHL this year and called it a young, dumb league. And there's a little bit of truth to that, as harsh as it is. You're putting young, talented players in situations, and they're going to make mistakes because they aren't seasoned pros. They don't know how to win yet. So.
Yep. And I think one of the other bigger changes in the game is there's more analytics now. So I'm just curious, are you an analytiits guy or not so much?
You know what? I've become an analytics guy. I think we've coaches have always been analytics guys. It's different now. It used to be scoring chances or tracking puck battles or tracking, breakouts, whatever the 3-4 things that you felt were important. And a lot of times it was the backup goalie doing it with a clipboard or your third assistant up top. Now it's, reams of data that get pumped out the morning after a game, and you have to filter through it, or you have a group of analytics guys that filter through that for you. I think it's really valuable. I think it has its place, and you got to be careful. But I think there's value both in keeping your team on the right track and reinforcing what your eye sees. But also there's some value in individuals. I know Jason Robertson went home last summer and looked at the analytics and saw he hadn't hit the net as much as he wanted to, and he wanted to fix that over the summer. And, he's done that. I think I saw a stat that, he's hit the net 6 or 8% more than he did last year, and all of a sudden he's got 23 goals in 25 games. Yeah. So, I think it has a place both individually and with teams.
Yep, interesting. And so last question before diving into some rapid fire, just because I was curious. So Joe has described you as a player's coach, right? And you hear that term thrown around sports in general a lot. So for me, or I guess for you, what do you think the player's coach actually means? What is the definition of a player's coach to you?
Well, I think I've grown into that. Like I said, I think coming out of junior, I was more of a dictatorship than a player's coach. I think I learned to be that at the NHL level. And when you get a leadership group with people like Joe Pavelski, it's easy to trust your group. I think that's part of being a player's coach. You have to walk in a situation where you go, okay, I can trust this group's going to give me an honest opinion of where they're at, where we're going. And if you can trust that, it's easy to be a player's coach because you put it in their hands. So I think having people like that in your room is critical to being a player's coach. And I think, it's a cliche, but I think as a coach, I always wanted my coaches to be honest with me. I wanted the truth, as tough as it was. I wanted to know where I stood at all times. I wanted it to be black and white. I didn't want any gray area. And I think, our staff tries to approach it that way, and I think players respect the message, even if it's harsh, if you do it that way.
Yeah, players appreciate that and want to be around that, and is a testament to what happens on the ice. Okay, so some rapid fire here.
All right.
You can go one word, one phrase, but diving right in. So who was your favorite athlete growing up as a kid?
I had to be Daryl Sittler. I was a Toronto, Ontario, Canada guy. Daryl Sittler was the captain of the NHL Leafs at the time.
Got it. Who's your favorite athlete to watch in current day sports? Doesn't have to be hockey. Could be though.
You know what? I'm heavy into the World Cup right now, and my father's from Holland. So the Dutch team and Louis van Gaal, their coach. I've been watching him. So I think I'm a big sports guy, whatever's on. So currently right now, that's what I'm into.
Got it. What's your favorite city to travel to? What favorite NHL city?
Love Vegas, love Nashville. and love any of the Canadian cities we go back to.
Those are hard to beat. Who's your favorite music artist?
Wow. You know what? I love Nickelback because they're a Canadian band.
Yep.
I love the Tragically Hip because they're a Canadian band. And best concert I've ever seen, Darius Rucker. So I'm a
I've seen
Darius
Rucker
Rucker
play.
guy.
He's incredible.
Yeah, he's great.
2 more. What is your biggest fear?
Being a good husband and father with the job we do. You know, it's tough to juggle that.
Yep, 100%. Last one. What is one word that best describes you?
I think honest.
Okay. Well, Pete, thank you so much for the time today. We talked a lot about different themes and whatnot throughout your career, but I guess if you have that one lesson to really wrap it all up that you could pass along to the next generation to help them accomplish their dreams, what would that one lesson be?
Stay in the moment. You know, everybody's in a race to get to where they see their perfect life being. I think the best message I can give is stay in the moment. Do the job you're doing, whatever that is. Stay in the relationship you're in. Invest in it. Everything else will fall in place if you do that.
Embrace the journey.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pete, so much, and good luck the rest of the season.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoyed the content. There's plenty more Pass the Torch episodes, along with other podcasts we got going on and video series we do. So subscribe, and we'll see you later.